Welcome to our latest webinar, brought to us by the American Petroleum Institute, the role of the source inspector in the quality assurance process. Hi, my name is Greg Alvarado, and I'm the chief editor of the Inspectioneering Journal. Our speaker today will be John Reynolds. John is a principal consultant with Intertek Asset Integrity Management. Prior to this, he was a master engineering consultant with Shell Oil's West Hollow Technology Center in Houston. John joined Shell in 1968. Over the last 49 years, he has held various engineering and management positions in the United States and the Netherlands within the refining and chemical manufacturing fields, where he has primarily focused on mechanical integrity issues. John is currently the master editor for several API standards on inspection and remains active in both the API Inspection Subcommittee and the ASME Post-Construction Committee. John is the past chairman of the API Inspection Subcommittee, the API Task Group on Inspection Codes, the API Task Group on NDE Technology, and the API Task Group on API 580 Risk-Based Inspection. We won't have time to address your questions during this webinar, but we'll do our best to address them all at a later time, so please submit your questions. With that, I'd like to turn it over to John.
Thank you, Greg. As you've mentioned, the topic of this webinar is the role of the source inspector in the quality assurance process. So let's begin with talking about what the purpose of this webinar is. It's basically to explain the important role of the source inspector, SI. You'll need to get used to that acronym. You'll see it on quite a few of these slides, in the quality assurance process for the oil, gas, and petrochemical industries. Additionally, it's to talk about the difference between quality assurance and quality control and what they're all about, and to emphasize the quality assurance process of the source inspector and his very important role in the quality control process that is carried out by the supplier vendor. That's another acronym you'll see quite a few times on the slides today, SV standing for supplier vendor. And finally, to encourage you to become a competent, certified source inspector in the oil, gas, and petrochemical industries. This graphic shows what we're going to talk about for the first few minutes, a five-step process where in the beginning, the quality of the fabrication is specified. The quality assurance process is then implemented. The important role of the source inspector, where the source inspector goes to work in implementing the quality assurance process. How the source inspector handles defects and flaws and gets them corrected. And then the final things that need to be done in order to deliver a quality product. First of all, what is source inspection all about? It's basically the process of providing quality surveillance of materials, equipment, fabrications that are being supplied to purchasers in the oil, gas, and petrochemical industry. Source inspection also provides confidence to the purchaser that these materials and these fabrications that are being purchased meet the actual minimum requirements as specified in the contractual agreements. And source inspection is a very important part of the overall quality assurance process in the quality assurance, quality control process. Okay, it's important to understand the difference between quality assurance, QA, and quality control. First, quality assurance is a proactive quality process that aims to prevent defects and refers to a program of planned, systematic, and preventative activities implemented in a quality system that is intended to provide a degree of confidence that the product that's been ordered will consistently meet specifications that were laid out by the purchaser. It includes the systematic measurement comparison with a standard, monitoring of processes, and an associated feedback loop intended to avoid deviations from those original specifications. The source inspector is very involved in the quality assurance process. On the other hand, quality control entails the specific steps in a quality assurance process that we just talked about that aims to find potential defects in a product before it is released for delivery. For example, visual testing, penetrant testing, radiographic testing, UT testing, dimensional verification, and a host of other techniques are employed during the quality control process. The quality assurance process specifies the particular quality control steps, which I just spoke about, that are necessary during manufacturing and fabrication of a product. In other words, the source inspector is responsible for the quality assurance part of the process that I just explained, whereas the supplier vendor is responsible for the quality control part of the process. Okay, let me talk now about the 5-step process in quality assurance, starting with specifying the quality. Step 1. This is where employers and purchasers of the materials and equipment specify in detail what is necessary and how the quality will be built into the equipment. This entails minimum requirements and specifications that need to be established, creating all the design drawings and the fabrication details, and the application of company as well as industry codes and standards that are involved in the quality process, and creating a total management plan for the source inspector to follow in the activities that he'll have in the fabrication shop. Also, this is where expectations for quality control by the supplier vendor are outlined and agreed upon. And a source inspection management plan is drawn up that outlines everything that is expected of the source inspector as well as the supplier vendor in the shop. The supplier vendor then in this step is selected who supposedly can meet all the requirements that have been specified in step 1. Okay, let's proceed to step 2, where quality assurance is implemented. A risk assessment is usually conducted to determine how much source inspection is needed depending on the criticality, or risk if you will, of the equipment that is being purchased for the project. Source inspection in the shop by the source inspector could vary from just one final visit when the shop believes that it is ready for delivery for low-risk equipment, or even weekly visits, possibly daily visits, or even full-time inspection, perhaps even on every single shift for highly critical, highest risk pieces of equipment. So as you can see, there's a significant difference between the amount of source inspection that may be specified for any particular type of equipment that is being purchased. In step 2 also, a source inspection plan is provided to the inspector, which indicates all the necessary activities that he or she is expected to apply in order to validate that the supplier vendor has met the appropriate specifications that were established in step 1. Additionally, a pre-inspection meeting is usually held with the supplier vendor to make sure everyone understands exactly what is required and expected, and the source inspector will be validating those things, and the supplier vendor knows that he or she will be in the shop looking over their shoulder to make sure things are going right. And then also in step 2, the amount and type of communications by the source inspector back to the project manager, including reports and photographs and any other issues that the purchaser wants to know about, those are established at this point in time. Source inspection, that's the third step. This is where the source inspector really goes to work. The source inspector receives all the necessary contractual agreements, and those are a number of documents like purchase orders, subcontracts, the inspection plan, project specifications, drawings, applicable codes, virtually everything that the source inspector will need in order to make sure that things are done right in the shop before any equipment is shipped to the project site. The source inspector then takes those documents, studies them, and completely familiarizes themselves with whatever requirements and expectations are included, and also makes sure that the supplier vendor is working off the latest set of those documents. Because typically it takes several phases. The final set of documents that are issued for construction might be the fifth or sixth draft. And it's always important to make sure that the supplier vendor is working off the final copy that was agreed to by everybody involved. Then also in step 3, the source inspector reviews the ITP plan, inspection and test plan, that the supplier vendor is expected to follow in order to gain confidence that the supplier vendor can produce the necessarily quality product in accordance with all the requirements and expectations agreed to. The source inspector then in step 3 verifies that the people that will be involved in fabricating the product, be it pressure vessels, heater tubes, piping, whatever it may be, has the appropriate training, skills, and certifications for those people in the shop that will be involved in producing that product. Additionally, in step 3, the source inspector monitors all of the supplier vendors' quality control activities to assure that they are in accordance with that ITP that we just spoke about and all the other documents that we just spoke about. Those activities typically include things like visual inspection, welding inspection, dimensional inspections, non-destructive examinations. You see several of them indicated here: pressure testing, mag particle, ultrasonic testing, radiographic testing, positive material identification, Brinell hardness checks, and a host of other types of tests and examinations, performance and functional testing before the product is shipped, and any of the other examinations and tests that were specified in step 1. Now we're ready for the fourth step in this graphic here, where defects or flaws might have been noted. Step 4, any changes to the contractual documents in the quality assurance or quality control process that the supplier vendor might suggest have to be agreed upon by the purchaser. It's not at all uncommon during the fabrication stage that the supplier vendor would come back to the purchaser or the source inspector and say, hey, we can do something a little better. If we change this, it'll save you money. We can create a better product, etc. And that's all well and fine. That's the normal learning process during fabrication of a piece of equipment. At any rate, but any of those deviations that occur from the originally agreed upon contractual documents have to be approved by the purchaser before they're implemented. Additionally, in step 4, if the source inspector notes any deviations from project specifications, any flaws or defects, if you will, they have to be quickly brought to the attention of not only the supplier vendor who's fabricating the product, but also the project manager or the purchaser of that product in the form of what we call a non-conformance report, or an NCR, a very common term in the industry. And those potential deviations then have to be documented and distributed for review and approval by the purchaser in accordance with the inspection management plan. The source inspector is also responsible for making sure that the NCR then that is finally agreed upon is actually implemented as it was agreed upon. Now we're ready for step 5 in this graphic, where the quality product is delivered. Prior to final acceptance and delivery of the equipment, the source inspector should determine a number of important things. And here are just a few examples. There's quite a few more than this, but overall, the work that is specified in the contractual agreements has been completed in accordance with the specifications. Very important overall aspect of what the source inspector's job is. All the NCRs, non-conformance reports, have been closed out and resolved by the supplier vendor QC representative, as well as the owner's or the purchaser's quality assurance representative. Any punch list items that were identified during the final stage have to be completed. All the required QC activities that we spoke about in step 3 and step 4 have to be noted as completed and documented. The supplier vendor's work must be deemed acceptable by the owner's QA representative in accordance with the contractual documents. All documentation that was specified in step 1 needs to be noted as being completed and acceptable to the purchaser. All the final painting and coating is complete and meets the quality specs required, and the final shipping instructions have been implemented. That's all involved in step 5, making sure that a quality product is being delivered to the purchaser. Okay, we're back now to our graphic that shows the 5-step process that we just spoke about, where first of all, the quality is specified for the product, and all the documents and specifications and codes and standards are created. Step 2, where the quality assurance process is implemented. Step 3, where the source inspector gets significantly involved and is in the shop making sure that things go right. Step 4, where any changes or defects are noted, recorded, and agreed upon as necessary. And step 5, where a quality product is finally delivered to the purchaser. Okay, let's transition now to a related topic, and that's training and experience of the source inspector. And here's some examples of the training and knowledge levels that a typical source inspector can achieve in his or her career. Okay? 4 levels, as you can see here. Level 1, an awareness and entry level source inspector. Level 2, a basic level source inspector. Level 3, a standalone source inspector. And level 4, that some inspectors can rise to, which is a mastery level in source inspection. Now let's take a few minutes to talk about each one of these levels. Okay, let's talk first about level 1, awareness and entry level source inspection. At this level, the inspector would be exposed to source inspection methods and technology at an introductory level and may act somewhat as a source inspection trainee, following around experienced, knowledgeable source inspectors that have been on the job for some time to learn as much about the job as they possibly can. Additionally, at this level, there's often training classes and on-the-job training involved. So at this level, the source inspector is trying to gain an awareness of the broad scope of source inspection activities, procedures, project documents, the kinds of records that are required, the manufacturing processes that go into each piece of equipment, the applicable codes and standards, etc., that he or she will eventually need to know about and understand in greater detail as they become more experienced and proceed to the basic level. And of course, that is level 2, basic level inspection. Here's where the new source inspector would have a full-time, would be on the job for about a year or so. They would have completed most of the awareness and entry-level training and a lot of the on-the-job exposure that is necessary, and would be becoming a more competent basic source inspector and can perform as necessary, but still with adequate supervision. At this level, the new source inspector very often would have already passed the source inspector entry-level exam by the API inspector certification program and be gaining more knowledge and experience with a variety of source inspection issues and procedures. The source inspector at this level will begin to be exposed to more complex and different types of source inspection issues, including not only fixed equipment like piping and pressure vessels, but also the potential for being a source inspector for electrical gear, instrumentation and control systems, and rotating machinery like pumps and compressors. All right, let's move on to level 3, where the source inspector becomes a standalone SI. The more experienced source inspector will have been on the job approximately 2 to 4 years, and at this stage have gained a pretty good knowledge of most of the key aspects related to source inspection that are established in company and industry procedures, and pretty much be able to perform all of the appropriate SI tasks with minimal supervision at this point. Also, the source inspector will have a detailed knowledge of all the industry codes and standards and a much better understanding of the quality issues and risks, and be able to correctly handle all the different kinds of changes and non-conformances that an inspector will typically come across during the fabrication stage. And again, at this stage, being a standalone source inspector, he or she is able to work with minimal supervision. And additionally, the standalone inspector should be able, at this level, to train entry-level inspectors. Additionally, at the level 3 standalone source inspector level, the experienced source inspector may be able to handle different and complex types of source inspection issues and equipment, including more complex mechanical fixed equipment, packaged equipment, shop fabricated piping. But also the source inspector may choose to get involved in other types of equipment like electrical gear, instrumentation, and rotating equipment, depending on the type of expertise that source inspector wants to pursue. Okay. Also at this level, the standalone inspector may very well start to obtain different types of certifications that'll improve his skills and make him or her become more of a go-to person for other source inspectors for specialty type knowledge. Those certifications would include API welding inspector certification, NACE coatings inspector certification, positive material identification training and certifications, as well as AWS inspector certifications. Now let's move to level 4, the mastery level, as I call it. The experienced source inspector typically will have been on the job, say 5 to 10 years, and at this stage have a very broad and in-depth knowledge of all aspects of source inspection included in industry standards and company procedures. And typically at this stage would be able to supervise and coordinate the activities of multiple other source inspectors. As the title suggests for level 4, at this point, the source inspector has really mastered the trade. And additionally, at this level, the source inspector should be able to create and teach source inspection course materials, create an on-the-job source inspection training program, speak with confidence about source inspection issues at conferences, and basically improve the effectiveness and efficiency of source inspection procedures and processes, and typically be able to handle very new and very different source inspection assignments and higher risk equipment. Again, typically not everybody will rise to this level, but it is an opportunity for those who, in fact, are interested in mastering the trade. In this next slide, I've just put up a gee whiz slide, if you will. And here are some of the technical topics that the source inspector will learn in order to perform well in this safety critical job of quality assurance. As you can see here, I've mentioned many of these topics, but not all of them. And it's not important that you be able to read this entire slide, but I just wanted to give you a smattering of the different types of issues that a typical source inspector will be involved in. As you can see, there are a lot of different types of examinations in the first couple of rows. Next couple of rows are different types of construction materials, fabrication techniques, inspection and test plans, different kinds of heat treatment, welding procedures, coatings and lining, galvanizing, stampings, symbols, a whole host of information and technologies and methodologies that the typical source inspector is going to learn about and apply in this very important safety critical job. There's an old saying in the source inspection function that goes like this: you don't get what you expect, you get what you inspect. Source inspectors help to make that come true. Supplier vendors typically pay a lot more attention to the equipment that they're fabricating in their shops when they know that a competent, capable source inspector is going to be on the job looking over their shoulders, as opposed to the purchasers who just assume that the supplier vendor is going to deliver what has been specified. Our industry is in need of more qualified, competent, certified source inspectors to make sure that it gets the quality that is specified in the contractual documents. You can be a part of that success story. Finally, let's talk about some reasons why I think you may be interested in becoming a source inspector. It's clearly a skill area that is needed in the oil, gas, and petrochemical industry. It's an opportunity to become a subject matter expert in a vital quality assurance job. It's also an opportunity to learn and apply new skills in a large body of knowledge in quality assurance and quality control. It's an opportunity to make sure things get done right in this very safety critical job. It's also an opportunity to progress through the various skill areas up to including the mastery source inspection level that I spoke about just a few minutes ago. I hope this presentation has piqued your interest in becoming a source inspector, because at the moment we're short of competent, qualified, capable source inspectors, and you could help close that gap. That brings me to the end of this presentation. If you're interested in learning more about the API Source Inspector Certification Program, I hope you will take the opportunity to visit their website shown on the bottom of this slide. Thanks again for joining me for this webinar.
John, thanks for that excellent presentation. And thank you for watching. We hope you have learned more about the role of the source inspector and about the quality assurance process.